I'm gonna record it. All right, this is September 22nd, 2015. This is working with the Boys and Girls Club in Salem, Oregon. And we are working and talking about the first two phases of the design process, the project identification phase and specification phase. So before we get started, I just want to ask you guys, were you able to kind of get into the website, get into the resources and start kind of perusing it and seeing how the first part of this, the project identification, might work?
So I went through the process of logging in and creating a profile, and then the first website that it took me to was Epic's High. I don't know how I got to that website, and I was looking at that, I was like, oh, that can't quite be right. So then I tried a different link, and it says that my account is pending approval. So then what I did is I printed up these items right here, so I have access to this to look through for today. So that's where we're at in regard on our end as far as being able to access the website.
I'll make a note of this. I know, Lauren, I did approve it. Now you may have to go back into an email, whichever email was your basis of that account, and accept it.
Okay, yeah, and it did send me a link. What I might have to do is go ahead and close out and go back in. The cookie might need to be reset, is what I'm thinking.
That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. Okay, so you started looking at it. Have anybody else looked at it and started thinking about possible places and projects for your students?
I have.
Howard, have you?
Yes.
I didn't get a chance because Howard, can you put it on mute? Because Howard has had more of a time to do it, but I know that we got all of the other documents.
That's good. Okay. So what other documents are you looking at? The gates? Is that what we're kind of looking at?
Yeah, that's what was given to us. We have Epic's 1.16, Gate 1 and Gate 2 basically is what we have here.
Great, because those are the two things that we're kind of going to go over today.
Exactly, okay.
Excellent, very good. As we get into this, today we're going to look at the design cycle and the project identification and specification phases. Then next week, I would like to also look at teaming and assessments along with the design, the conceptual design and detailed design. And then the last day is kind of going over how you feel like this is going to be implemented in your different learning environments. So if that sounds like a plan, that's kind of what I'm thinking. I think Sharice and I are kind of on the same page with that. So does that sound like a plan?
Yeah, sounds good to me.
Okay, okay. So we'll just kind of get started on this, and I'm going to take this, hopefully, and pull up the PowerPoint. Yay! So hopefully you'll see that. The project identification phase and specification phase. With the project identification phase, the main part of this is to understand what could possibly happen in the project and find the best use of time and the best use of resources for the project. So the thought is to make sure that they gather as much information as they possibly can about a potential project so that it is doable. So hopefully that you kind of look through it. The gates. What you have are the documents that the students would have, and this kind of helps them, gives them a guide to know what has to happen in each of the phases. So the gates are kind of an overview so that they have that. It's important and it's essential for the kids to be able to, one, know their community, know the potential stakeholders, and have a good idea of what could be a possible project before they leave that project identification phase. Now, when I say leave it, they don't necessarily will always, they may have to come back to this to gather pieces of this, but It's just one of the parts of it that gets started with the project identification phase. So the overview of this is the essentials of the project identification phases. We're going to look at how will the students identify the potential stakeholders and the needs within their community, and what are the essentials of the specification phase. Once they figured out what could possibly happen, how are they going to break this down into the smallest parts to start figuring out how to test it and how to build it. And then we're going to reflect and look at how that kind of worked, how they deliver, how they're going to get a deliverable. So the purpose of the identification phase is to identify needs within the community that possibly could be a service learning project, and how a good understanding of the community can help to make sure that the project is deliverable and measurable. So as we're looking at this, I want to talk also as we go through this, and I'm going to bring you guys back up, with the service learning. Do you remember what we talked about last week about service learning, about it being a symbiotic kind of relationship? Does anybody want to kind of pull that together for us?
I know for us, in regards to it, being that symbiotic relationship, what was the reason that we're excited, at least on our end, and I know Amanda is very community-minded, and she has a heart for serving the community, meeting needs in the community. And what's nice about this idea is that instead of just being activity-based, where we have teens and youth that are coming in and we're not just entertaining them, they're actually progressively working on something where they're building a relationship with an entity or maybe even someone in our community that has a legitimate need, and there's continual conversation, communication going on. So it's not just about a project, it's about a relationship. Mm-hmm. And this person is actually part of the project, because these youth are working on whatever the identified project is, whatever the identified need is, and there's this, it's not like, okay, we're going to build this, we'll see you 6 months from now. No, there needs to be this continual relationship along the way to where they're planning, they're developing, they're building, and then there's these checkpoints along the way. Is this on track? Is this, what's your input here? And I really like that, because it's problem solving, it's social interaction. There's a lot of things that can be accomplished through this, and it's funny because at face value people might think, oh, this is just engineering, but it's not. That might be a delivery model, it might be an avenue, but there's so much more to this that really appeals to us, because for the teens that are coming into the teen center, we really want to equip them more, not singularly just with a skill set, but with a whole set that's going to make them successful. They may not be an engineer, but they could go into a different field that they apply these skills that they've learned, working as a team, collaboratively, interacting with the community. So that's really exciting and appealing to me, because there's this intrinsic value to the whole project. I mean, Amanda, any thoughts on that?
I think you said it all.
Oh, okay.
The thing that is really that I think is going to really help your group be successful is the way that you're looking at this as not only an activity. It isn't an activity, it is a real project, but also you're seeing that the kids have to have ownership in this. And you're saying this like you were just talking about, how the students are seeing the needs within their community, and the students are, through the continual iterations and talking, developing the project. This is huge, because we see it sometimes where the teachers will develop the project and design the project and want to problem solve the project, and the kids are just the grunt work, right. And it doesn't work very well.
Yeah.
The students need to be really into it, making the decisions about how this is going to work. Yes, Matt.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I changed computers because I was having audio issues with the other one. So one interesting, unique challenge. So for Howard, he's my high school coordinator. We are actively recruiting high school members to come to our teen center. So we don't have the body of students to start to work with. I'm wondering what you think I see both a challenge and an opportunity. The challenge is we need bodies to do the project. The opportunity is, can we actively recruit those kids who already have a predisposition towards engineering or towards this type of work? Do you have any experience with folks recruiting to do an EPICS program specifically?
Well, we do have, usually what happens, or what I've seen happen, is that a lot of schools start off just like you, and they start off with, well, we kind of want to do this, but they don't have a lot of people. But what happens when the students start to see what could possibly be a project, they flock in. And I was thinking that a couple of things that might be helpful, I don't know if I'm just kind of brainstorming, but as a recruiting tool, talking about some of the projects that have already been done in EPICS, like the feeder. One of the schools in Florida is a middle school that their stakeholders are an elementary school, and they're designing a puppet theater for the elementary schools so that they can make the puppets and write the plays for a history museum of Florida history. So it's like this cascade of service. So the middle school is helping the elementary school so they can serve their community. So it's like just this snowball of things that happen. As far as recruiting, it might be one of those things where you have a meeting with them and say, what do you see as needs in your community? If you had a chance to change things, not something that you personally could change, what would it be? What are some things that you see that need to be worked on? And that might be a way of getting them started and saying, this is the vehicle to do that. We can help you to imagine this and to develop something like this. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and can I add something really quick to that? For us ourselves, I haven't really seen it as I'm trying to recruit youth that are interested in engineering. Like I said, engineering is just the delivery model.
Mm-hmm.
I think, Gene, you hit the nail on the head. If you go into a high school and you say, what are the needs in your community? How would you like to do something in your community? There's a lot of youth at all kinds of different levels that say, yeah, I want to do something. I want to make a change. I'd like to serve the community. I mean, obviously there's some who are going to be like, not even going to give you the time of day. But that's more, I guess for lack of a better word, appealing. You're gonna appeal to a larger group of youth by saying, hey, we want to meet a need in our community. Is that something that interests you? And at least in the teen center here, when we do projects that are community-based, the teens really jump on it, and they really like to do those things. And some of the things require us building stuff or putting stuff together. Again, that's just the avenue to deliver the project. So for us, the recruitment is, we're recruiting to the teen center. We're recruiting to the Boys and Girls Club, and guess what? We're recruiting you to this opportunity to meet a need in the community.
Exactly. To identify the need, because they live in it. They know what the needs are. They see it.
And like you said, it has to be their need. If you make it your need, then 3 or 4 weeks down the road, they're going to stop coming because it's what you're doing, it's not what they're doing.
Yeah.
I hear that, but I also am looking for what's my hook to get kids at the Sweegle Teen Center. And so if we can provide a service that isn't actively provided at a high school level, then I think that's one more way. It's just two different lenses to look at how do we recruit kids.
Yeah. And everybody deals with that kind of an issue as far as it goes, But your only problem is going to be the beginning, because once it gets started, it's big. They know that it's important, and they do it.
Hey, Jean, can I ask a question really quick?
Go for it.
Matt, how many have you recruited thus far? How many do you have?
Howard, why don't you answer that?
We can't hear.
I haven't recruited many yet.
Give me fingers.
You can't hear me?
Yeah, we can.
5? Okay. That's a
You
good
have
start.
5?
That's okay.
Yeah, it is a great start.
That's
okay.
fine. Yeah, you can start with 5. You don't have to have a large number to start a project. So you can start with the 5 that you have, and then as you begin to work, others may see you and then, want to participate. So you can start with those 5, and then you may not have to recruit anymore. They may want to become a part of you.
Well,
Hey,
we
Jim,
haven't started
okay.
actually recruiting yet. But what I feel is that since we have like a Keystone program, that I feel like since I will probably have around 10 within that program, I will mainly use this as for helping them develop ideas.
Okay.
That's
And also, we have middle school youth here,
Mm-hmm.
and I feel that I could use this model to like get their creative sides going, to help them think outside of their small little boxes and how they can help their school and community around them.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I would just go with what you have right now.
Hey, Gene, in your experience, is there a cap on how large of a group you feel is productive? Like, is a group of 15 too many for one project? And I think obviously the scope of the project has some play into that as well, but I mean, maybe I'm asking a question that doesn't really have an answer because it just depends on the need and the partner and all those type of things, but is there a group that's too big or is there a group that's too small?
We were just talking about this last week in Florida, and what we were talking about, one of the schools is doing a butterfly garden, and so there are like 2 classes that are working on this together, and so the teacher was thinking that this would be, she had to do this and for the science fair, and then she had to go into epics, and she had to have things disconnected, and we were talking, why not use this butterfly garden and this epics project as the basis for the whole class and basis for 2 classes, because what could be happen is that they're looking at invasive species. They're looking at a possibility of how could they use rainwater as a way of watering their garden. An educational piece. So there are so many sub projects with this overarching project that you could very easily have as many as you wanted to do.
Yeah.
And it might be multiple years depending on your project and what happens with it. So breaking it down into smaller parts and then figuring out what could be measurable, sustainable, doable, and economic the first year. So trying to bring it down and let them decide. Do you think we could get this done in this amount of time? How much money? Using all of the resources that they have, figuring out the budget, figuring out the materials list, figuring out how they're going to do this and plan it so that they could get it done in a year or a piece of it done in a year, whatever this big is. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, it makes perfect sense. I can see that working that way.
But again, it depends on, like in the college level, we have 4 people working on one project. And, again, they have to decide what they want to do, how far they want to go, and what is manageable. Yeah, Matt.
Have you had situations where, let's say you have maybe 8 to 10 kids, and the interest amongst the group is diverse enough where you actually have 2 parallel projects happening because they have 2 different interests?
Well, it depends on, again, it depends on how, yeah, that can happen. It depends on how much resources you have, how many resources, your monetary and time, And can they work together with it? But again, that has to be their decision. Can they come together and work this out this way? Boy, you know, talk about problem solving, collaboration, and probably some compromise in there too. So trying to figure that out. But again, that comes down to their project. Okay? Well, good discussion. Let me keep going on. I'm going to move you over. With the identification phase, let me go back on to that. They're going to identify the needs within the community, identify partners. They're going to be interviewing those partners to make sure that they have a good understanding of what is needed. Special needs within the community. There may be, and again, it depends on whether you probably are reaching out into the community. Do you have like a Veterans Affairs program? Do you have a Head Start program? Do you have programs within your community, a food bank? Those might be special interests or special needs that you know or the students would identify as a problem. So those are our particular ways of looking at it. They also need to look at the demographics of a community, can also give them insights into possible needs within the community. Also, if you have a population such as an immigrant population, in my community we had an immigrant population of Somalis, and so that was a really important need that they had, and it was something that could have made a really nice EPICS project. So they need to look at that, and also the culture and traditions of their community, because those could be needs and could be potential projects. The documents that through that gate, they're going to do a project charter, which kind of pulls all of that information together. And so they have this document that will be a living document that they will continue to update throughout the project. And that's 112, I believe. The number might not quite be right, but I don't know.
No, I think it's right. That's right.
I think I changed a bit. I don't know. My brain goes 5 different directions at one time. They're surveying, so they're going to look at and talk with the people in their community that they're kind of identifying. And you may have, like Howard has maybe 5 people, you may look at 5 different ways of going at this and survey them 5 different ways for that one project to be the best project for the use of time and materials. The PERT chart is a critical pathway, and that is to look at what are the things that what are the steps that have to happen to be able to get to fruition. So 1 has to happen before 2 happens before 3. But during 2, there may be 3 things that could happen at the same time. So figuring out what the critical pathway for the fruition or the completion of the project is an important thing to do in the first phase. 114 is a Gantt chart. And a Gantt chart is just, and I think we talked some last week about that, it's kind of a more extensive timeline. But again, it shows all of the things that are happening with the project. And it is, again, a living document. So it needs to continue to be updated so that you have, any time that you're asking about the project, the kids can pull out that Gantt chart and show how it's working. Now, most kids and most people kind of resist doing the Gantt chart, but I'll tell you, when you start to see how this can flow and how it can help to make sure that you're on timeline to be able to deliver something, it's huge. It's really an important part of it. They also develop a budget, and I also want to put in there, and I was thinking about this as I've been looking at this more critically, is also in 4.5, I believe, is a materials list. I don't know why I put the materials list way back there when probably it should kind of go up in here too. So these may be the iterations that happen with this, my design process with this that needs to happen. So materials list is 4.5 that you might want to check out. And then prototypes. So they first start off with looking at a prototype of just projects that have been done throughout the United States to get an idea of what a prototype does, because a prototype is a great way of being able to gather more information. So that is something that they are going to work through just kind of as an activity, so they get background knowledge on how a prototype works, that it doesn't have to be necessarily work. It has to be a way of being able to get information from the stakeholders. And I don't remember what lesson number that is, but also there's the second lesson that goes with it, is gathering information from the stakeholders from that. So they're practicing the talking part, the iteration part. So this just kind of goes through it, the documentations. You've got your project charter, which I talked about, and the survey results is using an SWOT, which is a simplistic decision matrix. Have you ever used a decision matrix? Anybody ever use something?
Something like that, not in a form like this.
Great. Well, and if you have one that works better, use it. This just gets the kids to understand with S what are the strengths of the project, the weaknesses of the project, the opportunities, and then threats to the success of the project. But it gets them to really think about it, that if there are threats to this, say, I don't even know, maybe they're trying to, well, I don't even know. If they can check that out and start thinking about that ahead of time, so maybe they can figure out a solution to a problem before it even happens.
Yeah, like time frame, resources, budget, abilities of those on the team. All those
Exactly. So really thinking through it. And then that also will help them with the strengths. If they have somebody that's really good at say, web design, they may decide that person can be the person that will be being the archivist, so making sure everything kind of gets up so they can see it. Looking at the strengths of each individual person would be an important part of that, the strength of the project.
Yeah.
So actually doing that.
And this Matt, the last time that we did this, Matt brought up a good point, and that is, we're looking at a program that aligns with the school year and carries into the summer. And it's got 2 phases to it that mostly aligns with the school year. So you're looking at 9.5 months to complete this project, or at least a phase of this project. So using this to survey your potential projects will help you decide, can we actually deliver this project, or a key step or phase in this project within this timeline with what we have and resources and things like that. So Matt, this would be a good tool to use when the kids are surveying the potential community needs. Is this something that we can actually pull off?
You might have a really nice setup in where you are, where you've got the summer at the end of your project, because what would be great is that they can do a lot of the gut part of working on it when they have a lot of time to do it.
Yeah.
That'll be wonderful. That really will. So, onward and upward.
Yep.
Here is, again, your project and community partner information. That's kind of an important part of it. Also, your budget and your Gantt chart, and this is kind of what those forms look like. So you will have those to be able to use. Also, there are rubrics involved in these that help the students to be able to use English language arts, particularly writing, reading, and speaking and listening, and these rubrics are built in so that it is possible to evaluate the students as we go along. So those are the rubrics. As they get ready, again, the gate that would go into 2 would be that they would have all this information together, and they're ready to, they've kind of identified a project, kind of identified a need within their community, that they've identified the project partner and they've identified the stakeholder. So the community partner and stakeholder could be two different people or two different pieces of it. An example might be what we saw with I always go back to the service dog organization, because Jim is the stakeholder, but that whole organization is the community partner. So, and it could be that what you make for the one stakeholder could be expanded out to the whole community partner. So it's just a part of that. But they have all of that together, and they present it before they get to before they get to the specifications. Because if they haven't, they don't know how they're going to break down this project or potential project into something that's doable. You know, that's surefire problem. It can be a disaster if they don't understand what is the needs and how they're going to address it, and getting ready to break it down into really small tasks that can be done. So the specification part of that is to look at what are projects that are already in place and why aren't they fitting the need of the community partner. So like the prior art, why isn't the dog feeder, why can't this guy find a dog feeder that works for him? Why doesn't it work for him? They have to be able to measure the testing that goes with this. So if they're measuring, they have to have an understanding of how each part can be broken down into smaller parts and how they test it so it's measurable. They have to have a measurability somehow so that it will work. And then explaining their PERT and Gantt charts, making sure that goes together. Does that make sense to you about the specifications and what the specifications are?
Yeah, and so in regards to the measurability, and it's one of the things that I wrote down is, I've written down that the project needs to be their own project, and then there reaches a point where that the project needs to be deliverable and it needs to be measurable. And I would imagine those tools that are developed for measuring as far as where you're at in the project or success of the project or completion of the project, those tools are developed based upon the project itself. There isn't necessarily generic tools that are out there to measure those.
No. But
it's up to the team to develop that.
Right. But the testing document helps to align that a little bit, because it's got what your inputs are and what your outcomes are and what you're trying to see. And then it has, how are you going to measure it? Like if you're measuring how far something goes, that's going to be your physics and that's going to be distance. So they have to figure out what kind of formulas. So then you get into that math application when you get into the measurement pieces. So it's not merely that it's a multiplication or just static computation. It may be an application of algebra, or it may be an application of physics. So those types of things will appear and come out. But the other piece is that we can, if you get into those situations and your students get into those situations where they need help, we are working on, and Charisse and I have been talking about this, we are going to be, and this might be another part of this, is to get a person from Purdue, a Purdue student who might be helping with you. Or it could be a Purdue alum or somebody in the community that is the physics teacher at a school, or who knows. That's going to be one of those interesting things as we get into this, just finding all of those people, those experts that come out of the woodwork when you start working on projects like this.
Yeah, well, and that really aligns with what we're trying to do. We're really trying to move into a phase where we're bringing volunteers within the community that are experts in a specific field,
There you go.
Where they come in and they are actually working with these youth, not only in a service learning project, but in anything that we're doing, is, realizing I'm not the expert when it comes to physics or when it comes to engineering or whatever is needed to move this project or this activity along. So I'm going to go out and find this expert to come in and work with these youth. And the fact that knowing that you guys potentially could be a resource for that, whether it is a Purdue alum or even people that have already networked with the FX program. That aligns with what we're trying to do.
Yeah, great. Very good. Well, that's what we're gonna, but they have to figure out the specifications to be able to know what they need.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah. Well, I really love this because it's so funny. When I was first introduced to the EPICS program, it really was introduced as engineering, but what I'm finding out is this is about just filling a need, and it may incorporate all kinds of skills needed to accomplish this task, which is great.
And I've always looked at, and as I've gotten into this more, I see that engineering is just a framework for being able to do the design of it. But you incorporate you incorporate everything. You incorporate every skill that kids need to be successful. They have to be able to problem solve. They have to be able to critical think. They have to be able to compromise, communicate. They have to understand physics. They have to understand math. They have to understand even social studies. And they have to be able to speak, listen, write, and read. So
Yeah.
it's like the whole gamut.
It's everything.
It
Yeah.
is.
Great.
I am really sold on the program, and after getting into it. So as we go along, so the presentation planner, obviously you guys have had this, and it just talks about what they're doing in the second phase. They have to have their project charter. They are continuing to work on it. They're developing the personas and scenarios so that they have a better understanding of what the need is in the community without necessarily always, they've really done a character study of what has to happen to better understand the need. The specification documents, they're figuring out what exactly has to happen and pulled together to be able to build whatever they're going to build or do whatever they're going to do. They're updating their PERT chart, which is that critical pathway, their Gantt chart, which is their flow of how the project's going to run. Understanding what is out there, what the prior art is, state of the art is another way of saying it. Why isn't that meeting their needs? But are there pieces of it that the kids could use or we could use to develop the project? Is this a good idea? Which is a good idea of this project or this product that could be used? So there's no problem with looking at what other people have done, but why isn't it fitting with this? And then figuring out what the cost of it is and how much is the budget. So there also is in the second one a progress check. Need to go back. An EPICS project progress checklist, which will help them to be able to see, okay, we're here. This is what we need to do next to be able to get where we're going to go. So these documents are already in there. I think I've kind of gone through these. The project charter. There's your Gantt chart, your specification documents and requirements. Here's your benchmarking prior art, so the kids can do this. Again, these documents are editable so that they can use this as a digital format, so they've got it, and they can continue to upgrade it and update it. And here's the project approval checklist. So they have identified key stakeholders. This is the project lead, the teacher, and the project partner. So they're all kind of going together saying this is where we're at. This is what we think. This is what has come together, and this is where we think we are to be able to move this thing through. So again, this is a document that they can use as kind of like a checklist. Well, we've hit this. This is where we're at. We're ready to move to the next phase. So this is their checklist. Any questions? I kind of went through all that kind of fast.
No, I'm excited. I mean, I'm excited about the whole service learning bent to this, but also just walking through. A lot of times, these documents that you have here are documents that we end up developing ourselves if we're piloting something.
Yes.
And so to know that they already exist, so I don't have to reinvent the wheel,
Yeah.
I'm just sitting here extremely thankful.
Great. Well, like I said, if this is what I did for a bazillion years, and I thought if I'm going to use
That's a long time. That's a long time. A
It is
bazillion
a
years.
long time. It is a long time. But I knew in my own heart, I mean, whenever I developed units, you know how it is. You develop units, you have all these documents that go with it. But any kind of unit it's like music. If it isn't played, it doesn't really exist. The same way with projects and with lessons, it is something that needs to be used to see how it works. So it's just one of those things that I wanted it to be useful. Definitely useful. So what I'm seeing for as we kind of go along, the thing is that next week we're going to kind of look at how do you take those specifications and bring it down into, and also I forgot to say that during this phase they will develop an initial prototype. So they will do an initial prototype that may be just paper and pencils. It may be just straws and rubber bands and whatever, but it is a way to get the idea out to the stakeholders so they can see it.
Yeah.
And any kind of documentation as far as sketches and so forth. So it's just that documentation, artifacts for it. But they need to have that prototype. They need to have an understanding of what the need is. And then in the next phase, they really start honing it down into what are the needs that this could solve. And then they need to look at multiple prototypes. So if they had 4 people on a team, they may have 4 different prototypes or 4 different things that have a different bent to it. And they take all of that and present it to the stakeholders saying, well, do you like this? Do you like this? Do you like this? Do you like this? Kind of goes back to our Nazareth kids when they were taking that prototype to their, if you haven't had a chance to watch that video, it's really pretty powerful. Taking this prototype back to their stakeholder, and he said, I don't like any of it. I don't want it at all. And so they went back to the drawing board, and he was like, can't you do like a Pez dispenser? So that's how they got started thinking of it in another way than by really listening to what the guy had to say. So it's very interesting. So we're going to go through next week. We'll go through the conceptual design with multiple prototypes, go through the detailed design, which they really do a lot of the testing on. We'll also kind of look at assessments and teamwork and the teaming piece, because I thought that might be important. And then the last week we'll just kind of finish up with however we can help you facilitate any other pieces that you're going, I don't understand how to get to here. Maybe I can guide you in that direction.
That sounds great.
Any questions that you have? Howard, are you doing okay with trying to figure this out with your students and your keys? It was kind of like your capstone, isn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, doing, but I have another question.
Mm-hmm.
Are there like any projects where this wouldn't work? Because I have
Okay.
an idea like creating with the students creating an app, because they're like always on their iPods or like they love the computer. So I want to bring like a technological part to community-based service learning.
They still have to go through the design process. So yeah, I mean, this is design. It could be, you'd use the same kind of design process if you were painting. You would still have to go through what's prior art, you would still go through the strengths of your team. You would go through all of that, and I think it's a perfect example of how you could use it with an app. Apps are perfect for it.
Yeah.
Anybody else have any questions or comments or thinking or?
No.
Okay. All right. We'll continue to look through this, and then we'll give you next week. We'll give you the or before next week, making sure that we give you the right go-to-meeting date, the right link, and then we'll give you the rest of the information. But on the web page, if you go down, it will be the 3rd virtual session, so you can look through that in that www.epicsk12.org.
Excellent.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Gene. I really appreciate it.
All right. Thank you. You take it easy.
We will.
Enjoy the rest of your
Thank
day. All right. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.